For 3,000 years, the Draknari Empire had ruled the galaxy with claws of steel and hearts of fire. Their dragons were living weapons that chose only the worthy, and for 3 millennia, only royal blood had been deemed acceptable. The final trial was a sacred ritual where dragon eggs would hatch in the presence of heirs, bonding with those destined to rule. But something was wrong. 17 royal heirs from across the known worlds had just failed spectacularly. The ancient black dragon egg, rumored to be the last of the elder bloodline, had remained cold and silent as each prince and princess approached with their genetic perfection, their centuries of training, their unshakable confidence in their divine right to power. The dragon lady, Empress Vexthara herself, watched from her obsidian throne as the most promising candidates in galactic history walked away in shame. Her golden eyes, older than most civilizations, held a secret that would shatter everything the universe believed about worthiness, power, and the strange little species called humanity. In the far corner of the Great Hall, unnoticed by the departing royalty, sat a human exchange student from Earth. Marcus Chen was there purely by bureaucratic accident. A scholarship mix-up had placed him in an advanced xenobiology program meant for future emperors and empresses. He'd spent the semester being ignored, dismissed, and occasionally ridiculed by his classmates who couldn't understand why a lesser species was even allowed in their presence. But as the last heir departed and silence fell over the chamber, the dragon lady's ancient lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Her eyes found Marcus, still hunched over his datapad, frantically taking notes about dragon bonding failures for what he assumed would be a fascinating research paper. "Interesting?" she murmured, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Very interesting indeed." The black egg began to glow. Marcus Chen had always been good at being invisible. Growing up in suburban Portland, he'd perfected the art of blending into backgrounds, avoiding attention, and keeping his head down. It was a skill that served him well during his first semester at the Galactic Imperial Academy, where being noticed usually meant being the target of some creative alien bullying. The academy floated in the void between 3 star systems, a massive crystalline structure that housed the children of emperors, the heirs of ancient bloodlines, and through what Marcus was convinced was a clerical error of cosmic proportions. His acceptance letter had arrived the same week he'd been rejected from Oregon State, and his parents had assumed it was some kind of elaborate scholarship scam until the transport ship landed in their backyard. Now 6 months later, Marcus sat in the hatching chamber trying to make himself as small as possible while the most important people in the galaxy experienced what could only be described as an epic collective failure. The chamber itself was a marvel of architecture with walls of living crystal that pulsed with soft bioluminescence and a domed ceiling that displayed real-time images of distant nebulae. At the center, on a pedestal of black volcanic glass, rested the egg. The egg was roughly the size of a basketball, but that's where any resemblance to Earth's sports equipment ended. Its surface was midnight black with veins of silver that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. According to his xenobiology textbooks, it was approximately 3,000 years old and had been waiting for the right person to hatch it. The dragon lady herself had laid it during the early days of the Empire, and it had rejected every potential bondmate since. Marcus had read about dragon bonding in his coursework. It was supposed to be the ultimate partnership, a joining of minds that created the most powerful force in the known universe. Dragons weren't just large flying lizards, they were reality warpers, capable of manipulating matter and energy on a scale that made human nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. A bonded dragon and rider could level planets or create new ones, traverse dimensions, and theoretically live forever. The problem was that dragons were incredibly picky about their partners. Prince Zephyrian of the Andromeda Spiral had been the first to fail. Marcus had watched from his corner seat as the tall, golden-skinned heir approached the egg with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his own superiority. Zephyrian's genetic modifications were visible to the naked eye, eyes that glowed with inner fire, skin that shimmered with metallic undertones, and muscles that had been enhanced by centuries of selective breeding. He was everything a dragon rider should be, powerful, noble, and utterly convinced of his own worthiness. The egg had remained completely inert as Zephyrian placed his perfectly manicured hands on its surface and began the traditional bonding chant. Marcus had found himself taking notes, fascinated by the complete lack of reaction. According to his textbooks, even failed bonding attempts usually produced some kind of response. A warming of the shell, a faint glow, something. But the egg treated Zephyrian's presence with what could only be described as indifference. Princess Lirelei of the Centauri Collective had been next, her forearms moving in the complex patterns that her people used to demonstrate their readiness for partnership. She was a member of a species that had been dragon bonding for over 2 millennia, and her confidence had been infectious. Even Marcus had found himself leaning forward, certain that this would be the moment when the chamber erupted in the legendary light show that accompanied a successful bonding. Nothing. The failures continued throughout the day. Crown Prince Taxmore of the Beetle dynasties, whose chitinous exoskeleton had been polished to a mirror shine. Princess Vissandra of the local system, who was actually the Dragon Lady's own great-great-granddaughter and had been considered the most likely candidate. Duke Morpheus of the Shapeshifter clans, who had tried presenting himself in 17 different forms before giving up. With each failure, Marcus had watched the Dragon Lady more closely. Empress Vexthara was ancient even by dragon standards, and she had ruled the galaxy for longer than most species had existed. She sat on her throne of living obsidian, her form shifting between that of a regal humanoid woman and something far more draconic. Her scales were deepest purple, almost black, and her eyes held the wisdom and cruelty of eons. What fascinated Marcus wasn't her obvious power. That was intimidating enough to keep him pressed against his seat, but the expression on her face as air after air failed. She didn't look disappointed or concerned. If anything, she looked amused, like she was watching a joke play out that only she understood. Marcus had been so absorbed in his observations that he'd almost missed the final failure. Prince Quantum, 7 of the Digital Collective, had been the last hope, a being of pure energy temporarily housed in a crystalline form. If anyone could have connected with an ancient dragon egg through sheer force of will and technological enhancement, it should have been him. But the egg had remained as cold and unresponsive as it had been for the previous 16 candidates. Now the chamber was nearly empty. The failed heirs had departed in various states of shame, anger, and confusion. The Dragon Lady's advisors whispered among themselves in a dozen different languages, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The assembled media representatives were updating their networks with news of the unprecedented failure, and Marcus sat in his corner frantically typing notes about the day's events and trying to process what he'd witnessed. Fascinating, isn't it? The voice came from directly beside him, causing Marcus to nearly jump out of his seat. He turned to find the Dragon Lady standing there, having somehow crossed the vast chamber without making a sound. Up close, she was even more intimidating, easily 8 feet tall with features that shifted between beautiful and terrible depending on the angle and lighting. Your Majesty," Marcus stammered, shooting to his feet and attempting what he hoped was an appropriate bow. "I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to be here. The scholarship coordinator said it would be educational, but I can leave if—" "Sit," she commanded, and Marcus sat so quickly he nearly missed the chair. "You've been watching all day. What do you think went wrong?" Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty?" "The failures. 17 of the most genetically perfect, politically powerful, magically enhanced beings in the galaxy, and my egg treated them all like furniture. What's your theory?" Marcus glanced around, hoping to find someone else she might be talking to. When it became clear that the Dragon Lady was indeed asking for his opinion, he cleared his throat nervously. "Well, I'm just a student from Earth. I don't really know anything about dragon bonding." "Humor me," she said, her golden eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that made him feel like a bug under a microscope. Marcus looked at his notes, then at the egg, then back at his notes. I noticed that they all approached it the same way, same confidence, same assumption that they deserved to be chosen. Maybe. He paused, acutely aware that he was about to criticize the most powerful beings in the galaxy to their ultimate ruler. Maybe the egg isn't looking for someone who thinks they're worthy. Maybe it's looking for someone who knows they're not. The dragon lady's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. Elaborate. In my xenobiology classes, we learned about symbiotic relationships. The most successful ones aren't between similar organisms, they're between complementary ones. Each partner brings something the other lacks. If dragons are essentially perfect beings, immortal, powerful, capable of reshaping reality, then maybe they don't want a partner who's trying to be the same thing. Maybe they want someone who offers something different. Such as, Marcus felt sweat beating on his forehead despite the chamber's cool temperature. Uncertainty, curiosity, the ability to be wrong and learn from it? I don't know. I'm probably completely— "Stand up!" the dragon lady interrupted. "Walk over to the egg." Marcus's brain seemed to short-circuit. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me. Walk over to the egg. Your Majesty, I really don't think that's a good idea. I'm human. We're not even supposed to be capable of dragon bonding. The genetic compatibility studies clearly show—" Marcus Chen. Her voice carried a weight that seemed to press against his mind. Walk over to the egg. Marcus found himself standing before he'd consciously decided to do so. His legs carried him across the chamber while his brain screamed at him to stop, to apologize, to explain that this was clearly a mistake. The egg loomed larger as he approached, its silver veins seeming to pulse with a rhythm that matched his accelerating heartbeat. When he was close enough to touch it, Marcus stopped. The egg's surface was smooth and warm, like polished stone that had been sitting in sunlight. He could feel something radiating from it. Not heat, exactly, but a kind of potential energy that made the air around it seem to hum. "Well?" the dragon lady asked from behind him. "Well, what?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Touch it!" Marcus extended one shaking hand and pressed his palm against the egg's surface. For a moment, nothing happened. The shell remained its midnight black, the silver veins continued their slow dance, and Marcus began to feel relief that he would not be responsible for some kind of cosmic disaster. Then the egg cracked. It wasn't a violent eruption like Marcus had seen in nature documentaries about Earthbirds. The crack appeared as a single silver line that spread slowly across the surface, accompanied by a sound like distant music. Light began to seep through the growing fissures, not the harsh white of artificial illumination, but something softer and warmer, like candlelight filtered through colored glass. "Oh, shit," Marcus breathed, stepping back instinctively. The egg continued to crack, pieces of shell falling away to reveal glimpses of what lay within. Marcus caught sight of scales that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. The creature inside was still small, probably no larger than a house cat, but even in its newly hatched state, it radiated a presence that made the air itself seem to hold its breath. When the last piece of shell fell away, Marcus found himself staring at the most beautiful and terrifying thing he'd ever seen. The dragon was indeed small, but its proportions were perfect, as if someone had taken the essence of draconic majesty and condensed it into a form that could actually exist in three-dimensional space. Its scales shifted color constantly, cycling through shades of deep blue, purple, and black shot through with veins of silver and gold. Its eyes, when they opened and fixed on Marcus, held an intelligence that was both ancient and newly awakened. For a long moment, dragon and human stared at each other in silence. Marcus felt as if he were being examined, judged, weighed, and measured by a consciousness that existed on a completely different level than his own. He was acutely aware of his own inadequacies. His lack of noble blood, his complete ignorance of galactic politics, his tendency to trip over his own feet when nervous. Then the dragon spoke, its voice appearing directly in Marcus's mind with a clarity that made audible speech seem clumsy and inadequate. "You will do it," said. "You will do very well indeed." The last thing Marcus remembered before fainting was the sound of the dragon lady's laughter, rich and delighted, echoing through the crystal chamber like music from another world. When he woke up 6 hours later in the Academy's medical bay, Marcus discovered that his life had become significantly more complicated. The dragon, who had informed the medical staff that his name was Shadowmere and that he would be staying with Marcus for the foreseeable future, was curled up on his chest like the world's most expensive cat. Every breath Marcus took sent small ripples of barely contained cosmic energy through the air around them. Dr. Kekstari, the Academy's chief medical officer, was a tall, thin being whose species Marcus had never encountered before. She had too many joints in her arms and eyes that glowed faintly green in the medical bay's dim lighting. "Congratulations," she said dryly. "You appear to have accidentally started a revolution." Marcus tried to sit up, which proved difficult with a dragon on his chest. "I'm sorry, what?" The news networks have been covering the story for the past 6 hours. Human student bonds with ancient dragon egg. The nobody who became somebody. Species barrier shattered by scholarship student. The headlines get more dramatic by the hour. Marcus looked down at Shadowmere, who opened one eye and regarded him with what might have been amusement. "This is really happening, isn't it? This isn't some kind of elaborate hazing ritual." "I am as real as you are," Shadowmere said. In his mind, perhaps more so, reality tends to be somewhat flexible around dragons. "What does this mean?" Marcus asked aloud. "What happens now?" Dr. Kekstari's expression was unreadable. "Now, Marcus Chen of Earth, you have approximately 18 hours to figure out how to not get yourself killed. The Dragon Lady has requested your presence at tomorrow's council meeting, where you'll be formally introduced to the galactic leadership as the first human dragon rider in recorded history." She paused, her green eyes studying him with scientific interest. "You might also want to consider the fact that 17 very powerful, very angry heirs are probably plotting your demise as we speak. Dragon riders traditionally settle disputes through combat, and you've just claimed a position that they all believed was rightfully theirs." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Combat? But I don't know how to fight. I've never even been in a real argument, let alone—" "Then I suggest you learn quickly," Dr. Kekstari interrupted. "Because whether you wanted it or not, you're now a player in the most dangerous game in the galaxy, and the other players have been practicing for centuries." Shadowmere stirred on his chest, small claws kneading against Marcus's shirt with surprising gentleness. "Do not worry," the dragon said. "We will learn together, and we will surprise them all." Marcus closed his eyes and tried to process the magnitude of what had just happened to his quiet, ordinary life. 12 hours ago, his biggest concern had been passing his xenobiology final. Now he was bonded to an ancient cosmic entity and apparently expected to engage in mortal combat with the most dangerous beings in the universe. "I should have stayed at community college," he muttered. "But then," Shadowmere observed with what felt like draconic amusement, "you would have missed all the fun." Marcus had always been a quick learner, but nothing had prepared him for the steep learning curve of becoming a dragon rider overnight. When he woke up the morning after the bonding, Shadowmere had grown to the size of a large dog and was perched on the windowsill of his dormitory room, apparently watching the sunrise with philosophical contemplation. "Good morning," the dragon said without turning around. "How do you feel about learning to fly today?" Marcus sat up in bed, instantly regretting the movement as his head spun. The bonding had left him feeling like he'd been rewired at a fundamental level. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds carried emotional undertones he'd never noticed before, and he could sense Shadowmere's presence in his mind like a warm, constant companion. It was comforting and terrifying in equal measure. "Fly?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Don't you need to be, bigger for that?" Shadowmere turned his head to regard Marcus with one gleaming eye. The dragon's scales had settled into a deep midnight blue with silver accents that caught the morning light. Size is relative when dealing with cosmic forces. "Besides, we won't be flying in the traditional sense, not yet." A soft chime from Marcus's door announced a visitor. He opened it to find Instructor Veltar, a serpentine alien who taught advanced combat theory and had the distinction of being the only faculty member who treated Marcus like an actual student rather than an amusing mistake. Veltar's elongated head swayed slightly as she spoke. A sign of what Marcus had learned was either deep concern or suppressed amusement. "Mr. Chen," she said in her precise, sibilant voice, The Dragon Lady has requested that I oversee your accelerated education. We have much work to do and very little time." Marcus glanced at Shadowmere, who had somehow managed to convey approval without moving. "Accelerated education? The council meeting is in 14 hours, Veltar explained, sliding into the room with the fluid grace of her species. "You'll be expected to demonstrate at least basic competency in dragon riding, galactic protocol, and personal combat. Under normal circumstances, this training takes decades."
"And under abnormal circumstances?"
Veltar's head tilted in what Marcus recognized as her version of a smile. "Under abnormal circumstances, we improvise. Get dressed. We begin with breakfast and basic physics." 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the Academy's Advanced Training Center, a vast space that could simulate any environment in the known galaxy. Currently, it was set to resemble a peaceful meadow under an alien sky, complete with 2 suns and a gravitational field that felt about 20% lighter than Earth normal. Dragon riding, Veltar explained, is not actually about riding a dragon in the way that you might ride a horse. The bond creates a unified consciousness that can manipulate reality on a fundamental level. The dragon provides the power and cosmic awareness. The rider provides focus, creativity, and what we call reality anchor. Marcus watched as Shadowmere prowled around the simulated meadow, apparently testing the artificial grass with scientific interest. "Reality anchor? Dragons exist partially outside normal space-time," Veltar continued. "Without a bonded partner to keep them grounded in linear reality, they tend to become abstract concepts rather than physical beings. You are essentially Shadowmere's connection to the universe as we understand it." "She speaks truth," Shadowmere confirmed, looking up from his examination of a holographic flower. "I can feel the weight of existence settling around me through our bond. It is comforting." Marcus tried to wrap his head around the concept. "So I'm like an anchor that keeps a cosmic force from floating away into abstraction?" "Precisely. And Shadowmere provides you with access to energies and perceptions far beyond human limitations. It's a true partnership, not a master-servant relationship." "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "So how do we fly?" Veltar's head bobbed approvingly. "The right question. First, you must learn to share consciousness fully. Sit beside Shadowmere and place your hand on his neck." Marcus did as instructed, feeling the warmth of Shadowmere's scales through his palm. The moment contact was established, the world exploded into sensation. He could suddenly perceive the training room not as a human would, but as a dragon did. The artificial nature of the environment was immediately obvious. He could see the energy patterns that created the simulation, feel the boundaries where reality ended and holography began. But more than that, he could sense the vast network of power that flowed through the Academy, the star system, the galaxy itself. "This is how I see Shadowmere," explained, his mental voice now carrying harmonics that spoke of vast distances and cosmic time. "And this is how you ground that vision in the moment." The overwhelming sensory input suddenly snapped into focus. Marcus could still perceive the incredible scope of Shadowmere's awareness, but it was filtered through his own human understanding, made manageable and useful. He found he could shift his attention between the grand cosmic view and the immediate practical concerns of their shared reality. "Excellent," Veltar observed. "Your synchronization is remarkably quick. Most bonds take weeks to achieve that level of integration." Marcus was about to respond when he realized he was floating 3 feet off the ground. "What the—" He looked down in alarm, which immediately sent him wobbling through the air like a balloon caught in a breeze. "Breathe," Shadowmere advised calmly. "Flying is simply a matter of deciding that gravity is optional." "That's not how physics works," Marcus protested even as he continued to drift upward. "Physics," Shadowmere said with what felt like amusement, "is merely a suggestion when sufficient energy is applied. And we have access to rather a lot of energy." Veltar slithered beneath Marcus, her head craned upward to watch his progress. "Stop thinking like a human and start thinking like a dragon rider. You are no longer bound by the limitations of a single species. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to let go of his preconceptions about how the universe worked. Through his bond with Shadowmere, he could feel the forces that held atoms together, the electromagnetic fields that permeated space, the quantum foam that underlay all reality, and somehow, with just the right mental twist, he found he could nudge those forces. He opened his eyes to find himself hovering steadily 6 feet above the ground, Shadowmere floating beside him like a cat that had decided to ignore the concept of gravity. "Better," the dragon observed. "Now, shall we try going somewhere?" The next few hours were a crash course in applied impossibility. Under Veltar's guidance, Marcus learned to fly not just through three-dimensional space, but through what she called reality layers. Apparently, the universe had multiple levels of existence, and dragon riders could slip between them like moving between floors in a building. "This is the physical layer," Veltar explained as Marcus and Shadowmere practiced aerial maneuvers around holographic obstacles, where matter behaves according to predictable rules. But there's also the energy layer, where thoughts have substance, and the conceptual layer where pure ideas exist independently. Marcus tried a tight turn around a floating crystal formation and nearly crashed into a simulated cliff face. "How is any of this supposed to help me not get killed by angry royalty?" "Patience," Shadowmere advised. "We are learning the foundations. Combat applications will follow." Veltar's head swayed in agreement. Understanding the layers is crucial for advanced dragon riding techniques. For instance, she gestured, and suddenly the training room was filled with copies of herself, dozens of serpentine figures that moved independently but seemed to share a single consciousness. "This is a basic reality manipulation," she explained through all the copies simultaneously. "By accessing the conceptual layer, I can temporarily exist in multiple locations by becoming an idea that happens to be physically manifested. That's completely insane." From a human perspective, yes. From a dragon rider's perspective, it's Tuesday. The training continued through the morning, with Marcus learning increasingly impossible things. He discovered he could see through Shadowmere's eyes even when they were separated, communicate across vast distances through their mental link, and manipulate matter on a molecular level by convincing it to rearrange itself. The most unsettling part was how quickly it all began to feel normal. His human brain seemed to be adapting to cosmic-scale thinking with alarming speed, and he found himself casually considering actions that would have seemed like magic just days before. "Is this normal?" Marcus asked during a brief break while Shadowmere practiced changing sizes by compressing and expanding his personal reality field. "I mean, am I still human?" Veltar coiled herself into a comfortable spiral, her head resting at eye level with Marcus. "You are human plus something more. The bond doesn't erase what you were. It adds new dimensions to what you are. Your human perspective is actually what makes you valuable as a dragon rider." "How so?" "Dragons think on cosmic scales. To them, individual lives are like brief sparks, and entire civilizations are temporary arrangements of matter. They need partners who can remember that those sparks matter, that temporary arrangements still have value." Marcus looked at Shadowmere, who had grown to roughly horse size and was experimenting with having multiple heads. "Is that true? Do you really see individuals as unimportant?" Shadowmere's multiple heads turned to regard Marcus with expressions of consideration. "Before our bond, yes. Individual consciousness seemed fleeting, insignificant. But through your eyes I see that fleeting can also mean precious. That insignificant can still be meaningful." The extra heads faded as Shadowmere returned to his normal form. "It is an interesting perspective." "Which brings us to combat applications," Veltar announced, straightening to her full height. "Your opponents will expect traditional dragon riding techniques: overwhelming force, reality manipulation, cosmic scale attacks. They won't be prepared for human creativity applied to draconic power." She gestured, and the peaceful meadow dissolved into a harsh landscape of jagged rocks and swirling energy storms. "Let's see how you handle a hostile environment." The next few hours were significantly less pleasant. Veltar had programmed the simulation to present various combat scenarios, from one-on-one duels to large-scale battles involving multiple dragon riders. Marcus learned to dodge attacks that could unmake matter, to shield himself and Shadowmere from reality-warping assaults, and to fight opponents who could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was exhausting, terrifying, and strangely exhilarating. Every time Marcus thought he'd reached the limit of what his enhanced abilities could do, he discovered new applications, new ways to combine human ingenuity with draconic power. "You're thinking too linearly," Veltar critiqued after Marcus failed to counter a simulated attack that tried to convince him he had never existed. "Remember, you can access the conceptual layer. Instead of trying to prove you exist, simply decide that non-existence is invalid." Marcus tried again, and this time when the attack hit, he responded by briefly becoming the concept of persistence itself. The attack couldn't erase him because erasure was antithetical to his temporarily assumed nature. "Better," Veltar approved, "but you're still fighting like you're trying to survive. Dragon riders don't fight to survive. They fight to reshape reality according to their will." "She speaks wisdom," Shadowmere added. "We are not defending against attacks, we are correcting errors in the universe's configuration." Marcus was processing this distinctly non-human perspective when his communicator chimed with an urgent message. The display showed an image of his dormitory room, which had apparently been ransacked. His few personal belongings were scattered across the floor, and someone had burned the message into the wall. "Withdraw or die." "Well," Veltar observed with what seemed like genuine interest, "it appears your opponents have decided not to wait for the formal challenge period." Marcus felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "What does this mean?" "It means," Veltar said, "that your education just became even more accelerated. Come, we need to speak with the Dragon Lady immediately." As they prepared to leave the training center, Marcus caught sight of himself in a reflective surface and was startled by what he saw. His eyes now held flecks of the same silver that decorated Shadowmere's scales, and there was something in his posture, a confidence that hadn't been there before. He looked like someone who belonged in this cosmic scale reality. "You are becoming who you were meant to be," Shadowmere observed. "I'm not sure I like who I was meant to be," Marcus replied. "That," said Shadowmere with draconic amusement, "is probably what makes you perfect for the role." As they left the training center, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were only just beginning. The accelerated education had given him incredible new abilities, but it had also made him a target for beings who had been preparing for this kind of conflict their entire lives. He was about to find out if human creativity and draconic power could overcome centuries of royal privilege and cosmic-scale arrogance. The universe, it seemed, was watching with considerable interest. The council chamber was a sphere of pure crystallized space-time suspended in the void between dimensions. As Marcus and Shadowmere approached it through what Veltar called a reality conduit, he could see the assembled leaders of the galaxy floating within the transparent structure like specimens in a cosmic display case. "Remember," Veltar whispered as they prepared to materialize inside the sphere, "you are no longer representing just yourself. You are the first human dragon rider, which means you represent the potential of your entire species. Everything you say and do will influence how humanity is perceived for generations." Marcus tried to swallow his nervousness, but his throat felt dry. "No pressure at all. You will be magnificent," Shadowmere assured him, and Marcus felt a wave of confidence flow through their mental bond. "I have seen your true nature through our link. You possess something these ancient powers lack." "What's that?" Marcus asked. "The ability to surprise even yourself." The materialization process was disorienting, like being turned inside out through dimensions that shouldn't exist. When it finished, Marcus found himself standing on what appeared to be a platform of solid light in the center of the crystalline sphere. Around him, in a complex arrangement that somehow accommodated beings of wildly different sizes and environmental needs, sat the rulers of the known galaxy. The Dragon Lady occupied a throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive diamond, her form shifting between humanoid and something far more draconic as she observed the assembly. To her right sat Emperor Taxmor Prime of the Beetle dynasties, a massive insectoid being whose chitinous armor was inscribed with the histories of 1,000 conquered worlds. On her left, Queen Lyrelei the Eternal floated in a sphere of pure energy. There were dozens of others, beings of crystal and flame, entities that existed as living mathematics, creatures that wore black holes like jewelry. Each one represented a civilization older and more powerful than humanity, and their collective attention focused on Marcus with the intensity of a stellar furnace. Honored Council, the Dragon Lady began, her voice carrying clearly through the crystalline chamber despite the lack of atmosphere. I present Marcus Chen of Earth, bonded rider of the Ancient One called Shadowmere. A murmur ran through the assembly, sounds that ranged from harmonic tones to electromagnetic pulses to concepts that Marcus's enhanced senses translated into something resembling skeptical whispers. Emperor Taxmor rose from his seat, his movements causing small earthquakes in the chamber's gravitational field. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. This is the being that our children could not defeat? This larvae? Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but before he could respond, Shadowmere spoke directly into the chamber, his voice resonating through multiple dimensions simultaneously. This is my chosen partner, the dragon said, and the simple statement carried the weight of cosmic authority. I have waited 3 millennia for one worthy of my bond. Your offspring, powerful though they may be, lacked the essential quality I required. And what quality is that? Queen Lyrelei asked, her energy patterns pulsing with curiosity. The ability to grow, Shadowmere replied. Your heirs came to me complete, perfect, finished. Marcus comes to me full of potential, eager to become something greater than what he is. There is no comparison. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward his dragon partner, but it was quickly overshadowed by concern as he noticed several of the council members exchanging what looked like meaningful glances. He was beginning to suspect that this gathering wasn't just a formal introduction. His suspicion was confirmed when Princess Vexandra, the Dragon Lady's great-great-granddaughter who had failed the bonding trial, materialized on a platform directly across from him. She was tall and elegant, with the purple-scaled skin of her lineage and eyes that burned with barely controlled fury. Honored Council, she said, her voice carrying the musical tones of the royal bloodline, I invoke the right of challenge. This human has claimed a position that rightfully belongs to the children of the ancient bloodlines. I demand trial by combat to prove his worthiness. The assembled rulers erupted in what Marcus could only describe as cosmic excitement. Some applauded with sounds like thunder, others expressed approval through displays of colored energy, and a few began taking what appeared to be bets on the outcome. Marcus looked up at the Dragon Lady, hoping to see some indication that this was unexpected, that she would intervene on his behalf. Instead, he found her watching him with an expression of intense interest, as if he were a particularly fascinating experiment. The challenge is acknowledged, she announced. Combat will take place in the arena of truth, where deception and illusion cannot exist. The trial will begin at the next cosmic alignment in approximately 6 standard hours. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Your Majesty, I'm honored by the challenge, but I've only been bonded for 2 days. Princess Vexandra has been training for centuries. Isn't there some kind of preparation period, training wheels? Beginner's luck clause? The Dragon Lady's lips curved in what might have been amusement. The right of challenge requires immediate response. However, she paused, considering, it is traditional to allow both parties to prepare according to their customs. You may use the remaining time as you see fit. Princess Vexandra's eyes narrowed. 6 hours of preparation will not bridge centuries of breeding and training, human. I suggest you use the time to make peace with whatever gods your species worships. She underestimates us, Shadowmere observed privately to Marcus. This is to our advantage. Marcus tried to project more confidence than he felt. I appreciate the concern, Your Highness, but I think you might be surprised by what 6 hours can accomplish when you're properly motivated. The princess's expression shifted to contempt. We shall see. As the council session officially ended and the various rulers began to disperse, Marcus found himself approached by several beings who wanted a closer look at the anomalous human. Most were simply curious, but a few seemed genuinely interested in what his bonding might mean for the larger political balance of the galaxy.
"Your species is unknown to us," said a creature that appeared to be made of living liquid metal.
"What are humans like? What drives them?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "We're stubborn, I guess, and we don't like to give up, even when we probably should, especially when we probably should." "Interesting," the being observed. "And your homeworld? What is it like? Blue, green, full of people who are trying to figure out how to get along with each other and mostly failing, but still trying anyway." Marcus paused. "It's not much compared to all this, but it's home. It is more than you know." Shadowmere commented privately, "I have touched your memories of Earth. Your species' greatest strength is not their technology or their ambition. It is their refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible." When the last of the council members had departed, Marcus found himself alone with the Dragon Lady in the crystalline chamber. She had assumed a more humanoid form, though one that still radiated power that made the air shimmer around her. "You're afraid," she observed. "It wasn't a question." "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "I'm about to fight someone who could probably unmake me with a thought using abilities I learned yesterday from a dragon I met the day before. Fear seems like a reasonable response." The Dragon Lady nodded approvingly. "Good. Fear will keep you alive longer than confidence. But tell me, Marcus Chen of Earth, why did you accept the challenge? You could have withdrawn, returned to your homeworld, lived a normal life." Marcus looked at Shadowmere, who was exploring the chamber's crystalline structure with scientific curiosity, because withdrawing would mean admitting that humans don't belong here, that we're not ready for this level of responsibility. And maybe we're not, but someone has to try to find out. And if you fail, then I fail spectacularly enough that the next human to try will learn from my mistakes. The Dragon Lady studied him for a long moment. "You do realize that this challenge is about more than personal honor? If you lose, it will set a precedent that power rightfully belongs only to the ancient bloodlines. It will close the door on any possibility of new species joining the cosmic community as equals." Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility settling on his shoulders. "I'm beginning to understand that." "Good. Then let me give you some advice." The Dragon Lady leaned forward, her golden eyes fixed on his. "Vexandra is everything you are not. Powerful, trained, genetically perfect, utterly certain of her own superiority. She will come at you with the full force of imperial tradition and cosmic energy. You cannot match her strength." "That's not very encouraging advice." "I'm not finished. You cannot match her strength, but you are not meant to. You are meant to show her and the galaxy that there are other ways to wield power, other paths to victory." "She speaks wisdom," Shadowmere confirmed. "The princess will fight as she has been taught, using techniques that have been perfected over millennia. But those techniques have also become predictable." The Dragon Lady rose from her throne. "The arena of truth will be prepared. Use your remaining time wisely, young dragon rider. The future of your species may depend on what you accomplish in the next 6 hours." As she began to fade from the chamber, Marcus called out, "Your Majesty, why did the egg choose me? Really?" She paused in her departure. "Because," she said softly, "you are the first being in 3,000 years to approach it without already knowing what it was for." Then she was gone, leaving Marcus and Shadowmere alone in the cosmic sphere. "Come," Shadowmere said, growing to full size with a casual manipulation of local reality. "We have preparations to make." Marcus climbed onto Shadowmere's back, marveling at how natural the position felt despite having learned to ride only hours before. "Any ideas about how we're supposed to beat someone with centuries of training and the backing of the most powerful empire in the galaxy?" "Several," Shadowmere replied as they exited the chamber through a reality rift. "But first, we must visit your memories." "My memories? You carry within you the experiences of an entire species that has learned to survive against impossible odds. We will need to draw upon that heritage." As they traveled through the dimensional conduit back toward the academy, Marcus felt Shadowmere's consciousness touching his deepest memories, not just his personal experiences, but somehow the genetic and cultural memory of humanity itself. He saw flashes of human history, individuals standing against armies, scientists solving impossible problems, ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges when everything depended on their success. This, Shadowmere observed with satisfaction, is what the princess cannot understand. She has been taught that power comes from perfection, from unchanging strength. But your species has learned that true power comes from adaptation, from becoming something new when the situation demands it. Marcus felt a spark of hope kindle in his chest. "So what's the plan?" "The plan," Shadowmere replied with draconic amusement, "is to be magnificently, impossibly, typically human, and to remind the galaxy why underestimating your species is always a mistake." As they approached the academy, Marcus could see crowds gathering, students and faculty who had heard about the challenge, representatives from various worlds come to witness the unprecedented trial. The attention should have made him nervous, but instead he felt a strange sense of rightness. For better or worse, he was about to represent humanity on the galactic stage. It was time to show the universe what his species was really capable of. The arena of truth existed in a pocket dimension where the fundamental forces of reality were laid bare. As Marcus and Shadowmere materialized on the crystalline platform that would serve as their starting position, the overwhelming nature of the space hit him like a physical blow. Everything here was real in a way that made normal existence seem like a pale shadow. Colors had weight, sounds had texture, and thoughts cast shadows that could be seen and measured. The arena itself was a sphere of transparent energy, roughly a mile in diameter, suspended in what appeared to be the space between galaxies. Stars wheeled overhead in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and Marcus could feel the attention of cosmic forces that were older than civilizations. "This is where dragons come to settle disputes," Shadowmere explained, his mental voice carrying undertones of ancient memory. "Here, deception is impossible. Only truth can survive." Across the arena, Princess Vexandra stood on her own platform, and Marcus had to admit she looked magnificent. Her dragon Vorthak the Eternal was easily 3 times Shadowmere's size, with scales that seemed to contain captured starlight and eyes that burned with the fury of supernovas. The princess herself had assumed a form of living energy that crackled with power accumulated over centuries of training. Between them, floating in the exact center of the arena, the Dragon Lady had manifested in her true form, a creature of such cosmic magnificence that looking at her directly required Marcus to process what he was seeing through Shadowmere's enhanced perception. She spoke, and her voice reached every corner of the pocket dimension. "This is trial by combat in the arena of truth. The challenger seeks to prove that power rightfully belongs to the ancient bloodlines. The challenged seeks to prove that worthiness transcends genetics and tradition. Combat will continue until one party yields, is incapacitated, or is removed from the arena. Let truth be revealed." Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. During their preparation time, he and Shadowmere had developed what could charitably be called a strategy. But looking at his opponent now, he wondered if they'd been hopelessly optimistic. "Remember," Shadowmere said privately, "she expects you to fight like a dragon rider. She is prepared for overwhelming force, cosmic manipulation, reality-bending attacks. She is not prepared for what you actually are." "And what am I exactly?" Marcus muttered. "Human. And humans, I have learned, are magnificently unpredictable." The Dragon Lady gestured, and suddenly the arena erupted with spectral observers, representatives of every major civilization in the galaxy who were attending virtually to witness this unprecedented trial. Marcus caught sight of beings from species he'd only read about in xenobiology texts, creatures that existed as pure mathematics, entities that were older than his solar system. "Let the trial begin," the Dragon Lady announced. Princess Vexandra wasted no time. The moment the words left the Dragon Lady's mouth, she and Vorthak launched themselves across the arena in a display of power that made Marcus's teeth ache. The princess had become something between energy and matter, while her dragon opened rifts in space-time itself to travel instantaneously from one side of the arena to the other. Their first attack was exactly what Marcus had expected, a straightforward demonstration of superior force. Vorthak breathed a stream of what appeared to be liquefied reality, while Vexandra hurled bolts of concentrated cosmic energy. Either attack would have been sufficient to unmake most beings. Marcus and Shadowmere responded by doing something completely unexpected. They dodged. Not through superior speed or cosmic teleportation, but through simple Earth mammal evasive action. Shadowmere twisted through three-dimensional space like a cat avoiding water, while Marcus held on and tried not to lose his lunch. The attack sailed past them and struck the arena's barriers, where they were absorbed harmlessly. Princess Vexandra pulled up short, clearly expecting the trial to have ended with that first devastating assault. Phase 1, Shadowmere observed with satisfaction. Confusion. The princess regrouped quickly, launching into a more sustained attack pattern. She began hurling attacks from multiple directions simultaneously, filling the arena with enough destructive energy to glass a continent. This was dragon combat as it had been practiced for millennia. Overwhelming force applied until the opponent was crushed. Marcus and Shadowmere continued to dodge, but they were also doing something else. Each evasive maneuver brought them slightly closer to their opponent, following flight patterns that seemed random but were actually based on three-dimensional mathematics that Marcus had learned in his engineering courses back on Earth. She's thinking in straight lines, Marcus realized. All that power, but she's attacking like she expects us to stand still and fight back. Precisely. Royal combat training emphasizes dominance and direct confrontation. Your species learned to fight predators that were larger, stronger, and better armed. You learned to be clever. The princess was beginning to show signs of frustration. Her attacks were becoming more elaborate, drawing on techniques that warped the very structure of the arena. She created multiple copies of herself, open temporal loops that allowed her to attack from past and future simultaneously, and began manipulating the fundamental forces that held matter together. Each technique was a masterpiece of cosmic warfare, and each one failed to connect with targets that refused to engage on her terms. Now, Shadowmere said, Phase 2. Marcus had been dreading this part of their plan, but there was no avoiding it. He took a deep breath and began to sing. It wasn't a battle hymn or a magical incantation. It was Don't Stop Believin' by Journey, performed at the top of his lungs with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for drunk karaoke. The effect on the arena was electric. The spectral observers erupted in confusion. The cosmic forces monitoring the trial rippled with bewilderment, and Princess Vexandra actually stopped attacking to stare at him in absolute incomprehension. "Perfect," Shadowmere commented. "Continue." Marcus segued into Bohemian Rhapsody, and the arena's reality monitoring systems began registering phenomena they had no framework for processing. His voice, enhanced by his bond with Shadowmere, began to resonate through multiple dimensions simultaneously. The song became a weapon not because it was destructive, but because it was so completely alien to the cosmic consciousness of the arena that it created what could only be described as conceptual static. Princess Vexandra tried to resume her attack, but she was now fighting while being subjected to Queen's greatest hits performed by a dragon-bonded human at volumes that could be heard across star systems. Her concentration shattered. "Now," Shadowmere said, "the real attack." While Vexandra was distracted by the auditory assault, Marcus and Shadowmere began their actual strategy. Instead of meeting force with force, they began to engage with the arena itself. The arena of truth was designed to reveal truth, but what was truth when it came to dragon riders? Marcus reached out through his bond with Shadowmere and began to show the arena something it had never seen before, the truth of human potential. Through their shared consciousness, Marcus projected images of human history. Farmers becoming warriors when their homes were threatened, Scientists achieving impossible breakthroughs through stubborn persistence. Ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things simply because someone had to, and they were the ones available. But more than that, he showed the arena what humanity could become when partnered with cosmic forces. The images weren't of domination or conquest, but of exploration, growth, endless curiosity about what lay beyond the next horizon. The princess fights for the right to rule, Shadowmere observed. We fight for the right to grow. The arena began to respond. Reality itself seemed to lean in, fascinated by these possibilities it had never considered. The crystalline barriers started to pulse with new colors, and the cosmic observers found themselves witnessing something unprecedented, a trial that was changing the fundamental nature of the space it was conducted in. Princess Vexandra realized what was happening and launched a desperate final assault. She and Vorthak combined their powers into a single, reality-ending attack that should have unmade Marcus, Shadowmere, and a significant portion of the local dimension. Marcus met it head-on, but not with opposing force. Instead, he reached out through the arena's truth-sensing abilities and showed everyone present, the princess, the dragon, the cosmic observers, reality itself, exactly what he was. He was Marcus Chen from Portland, Oregon. He was 20 years old, not particularly brave, definitely not genetically perfect, and absolutely convinced that he was in way over his head. He was also stubborn enough to keep trying when the smart thing would have been to quit, curious enough to keep learning even when the lessons were terrifying, and human enough to believe that impossible just meant no one had figured out how yet. The princess's ultimate attack struck this truth and simply stopped. Not deflected, not countered, but absorbed into the reality of what Marcus represented. Her centuries of training, her genetic perfection, her cosmic power, none of it was enough to overcome the simple, stubborn truth of human potential. The arena fell silent. Princess Vexandra stared at Marcus in shock, her energy form flickering as she tried to process what had just happened. "How?" she whispered. Marcus, exhausted from the mental strain of the trial, managed a weak smile. "Because you were fighting to prove you deserved to rule." "I was fighting to prove I deserved to try." "Well said," Shadowmere observed with satisfaction. And accurate. The Dragon Lady materialized between them, her cosmic form radiating approval. "The trial is concluded. Truth has been revealed." She turned to address the assembled observers. "Let it be recorded that power is not the exclusive right of ancient bloodlines, but the responsibility of those who would use it wisely. The human Marcus Chen and his dragon Shadowmere are acknowledged as full dragon riders, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Princess Vexandra slowly returned to her normal form, looking stunned. "I don't understand." "I had more power, more training, more right to victory. How did I lose?" Marcus struggled to his feet, Shadowmere coiling supportively around him. "You didn't lose, Your Highness. We both learned something new." "Which is?" Marcus looked around the arena, at the cosmic observers, at the princess who had tried to destroy him, at the dragon lady who had orchestrated this entire test, that the universe is big enough for more than one way of being powerful. The princess considered this for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "it is time for the old ways to learn from the new." "An interesting development," Shadowmere observed privately. "Very interesting," Marcus agreed. Then, more loudly, he added, "Your Highness, would you like to grab some coffee and discuss xenobiology? I have a feeling we could learn a lot from each other." The princess looked startled, then intrigued. "Coffee? It's a human thing. Fair warning, it's highly addictive and will probably change your perspective on consciousness and reality. Side effects may include staying up too late solving impossible problems." For the first time since Marcus had met her, Princess Vexandra laughed, a sound like distant music that made the arena's crystalline structure resonate in harmony. "Very well, Marcus Chen of Earth," she said. "Let us see what other impossible things your species considers normal." As the arena began to dissolve around them, returning them to normal space-time, Marcus felt a sense of completion, not because the trial was over, but because it had started something new, a partnership between ancient power and human possibility that could reshape the galaxy. "This is only the beginning," Shadowmere observed with anticipation. "I know," Marcus replied, watching as the cosmic observers began to disperse, carrying news of what they had witnessed to every corner of the galaxy. "And for the first time since this whole thing started, I think that might actually be a good thing." 6 months after the trial in the Arena of Truth, Marcus found himself in a situation he never could have imagined, sitting in a coffee shop that existed in folded space between dimensions, discussing quantum mechanics with beings who predated the formation of his solar system. The establishment was called the Probability Cafe, and it had been Shadowmere's idea. The dragon had become fascinated with human social customs, particularly the concept of casual meetings over stimulating beverages. What had started as Marcus's attempt to fulfill a promise to Princess Vexandra had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, an interdimensional gathering place where beings from across the cosmic hierarchy could interact. Equals. "The fundamental problem," Princess Vexandra was saying, gesturing with one of her 4 hands while balancing a cup of earth coffee in another, "is that we've been thinking of power as a finite resource. Your species approaches it as infinite, but requiring creativity to access." Marcus nodded, sipping his own coffee while watching Shadowmere demonstrate size-shifting techniques to a group of young dragons who had started attending the weekly gatherings. The small dragon could now shift from housecat size to cosmic entity and back again with casual ease, using each demonstration to illustrate different applications of reality manipulation. The younglings learn quickly. They do not carry the assumptions that limit their elders. "That's exactly the point," Marcus said aloud, causing several of the assembled beings to focus on him. "On Earth, we have this saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But it turns out that's not really true. You just have to find the right motivation." Emperor Toxmore Prime, who had become a regular attendee after discovering that human engineering principles could solve several infrastructure problems in the Beetle dynasties, clicked his mandibles in agreement. "Your species' approach to problem-solving has revolutionized our thinking. Yesterday, one of my architects suggested building cities that grow rather than being constructed. The idea would have been unthinkable before our exposure to human concepts." Marcus still found it surreal to be having casual conversations with beings who controlled star systems, but the strangeness had become a comfortable kind of surreal. The Probability Cafe existed outside normal political structures, making it neutral ground where cosmic emperors could debate with scholarship students without violating any protocols of rank or hierarchy. "Speaking of revolutionary thinking," Queen Lirolei interjected, her energy patterns pulsing with excitement. "Marcus, have you given any more thought to the Academy proposal?" Marcus groaned. "I'm still a student. I shouldn't be designing curricula for an institution that trains future galactic leaders." "Why not?" Princess Vexandra asked. "You've already demonstrated that traditional approaches to education have significant limitations. Your informal teaching methods have produced remarkable results." It was true, though Marcus was still adjusting to it. What had started as coffee shop discussions had evolved into impromptu tutorials where he shared human perspectives on everything from physics to philosophy. Apparently, his habit of explaining complex concepts through Earth analogies, comparing faster-than-light travel to subway systems, or dimensional theory to apartment buildings, had proven surprisingly effective for students who had been struggling with abstract cosmic concepts. "The Dragon Lady believes you should establish a formal program," Queen Lirolei continued. "Integrated studies that combine human innovation with traditional galactic education." Marcus looked across the cafe to where the Dragon Lady sat in her usual corner booth, apparently reading what looked like a quantum physics textbook while simultaneously existing in 17 dimensions. She had become a regular patron, claiming that the coffee helped her think more clearly about temporal paradoxes. "Has she mentioned this to you?" Marcus called out. The Dragon Lady looked up from her book, her ancient eyes twinkling with amusement. "I may have suggested that the galaxy would benefit from educational approaches that challenge conventional assumptions. Translation, Shadowmere observed privately, she wants you to teach other beings how to think like humans. She finds your species' cognitive patterns useful. Useful how? Marcus asked. Your species, the Dragon Lady explained, folding her book closed and approaching their table, has a unique relationship with impossibility. Most galactic civilizations, when they encounter something that cannot be done, accept that limitation and work around it. Humans, when told something cannot be done, immediately begin trying to figure out how to do it anyway. She gestured toward the cafe itself. This establishment exists because you wanted to have coffee with a princess. Despite the fact that your species and hers had no formal diplomatic relations, no shared cultural framework, and no precedent for social interaction. Instead of accepting that such a meeting was impossible, you convinced a dragon to help you create a space where it could happen. Marcus blushed. I just thought it would be nice to hang out somewhere that wasn't a formal political setting. Exactly, the Dragon Lady said with satisfaction. You identified a need and created a solution without regard for traditional limitations. That kind of thinking could revolutionize galactic civilization. Emperor Taxmore leaned forward, his massive frame causing the dimensional furniture to adjust automatically. What would such an educational program look like? Marcus found himself improvising, drawing on his experiences from the past 6 months. Well, it would need to be hands-on, not just theoretical studies, but actual problem-solving with real consequences. And it would have to be collaborative, beings from different species working together instead of competing. He warmed to the topic as ideas began flowing. We could establish exchange programs between worlds where students live and work in environments completely alien to their experience. Princess Vissandra spent a month on Earth and came back with 12 new applications for dimensional engineering based on human transportation systems. The subway principle revolutionized our approach to interplanetary travel, the princess confirmed. Sometimes solutions are found not by advancing complexity but by embracing simplicity. And, Marcus continued, getting excited about the possibilities, we could create joint projects that require multiple species to contribute their unique strengths. Like the dimensional garden that Queen Lyrelay and I designed, her energy manipulation combined with human biological knowledge to create plants that grow in multiple realities simultaneously. You are describing a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization approaches advancement. Shadowmere, collaboration instead of competition, innovation instead of tradition, growth instead of stagnation. Queen Lyrelay's energy patterns flared with enthusiasm. We could establish campuses in different dimensional layers, each one designed to challenge students' preconceptions about reality. The Beetle dynasties would contribute engineering resources, Emperor Taxmore declared. If human creativity can be taught, my people will learn it. Marcus felt a familiar mixture of excitement and terror, the same feeling he'd had when first bonding with Shadowmere or facing Princess Vexandra in the arena of truth. This is starting to sound like we're talking about changing the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. Yes, the Dragon Lady said simply. That's exactly what we're talking about. She gestured and suddenly the cafe expanded, its walls becoming transparent to reveal the vast cosmos beyond. For 3 million years, galactic civilization has been stable, predictable, stratified. The same species have held the same positions of power, used the same solutions to the same problems, followed the same patterns of thought. The view shifted to show worlds Marcus had never seen. Crystalline cities floating in gas-giant atmospheres, space-based civilizations that had forgotten their planetary origins, entire systems that existed as pure mathematics. All of this, the Dragon Lady continued, was built by beings who accepted the universe as they found it and worked within its limitations. But your species looks at limitations and sees opportunities. You see impossible things and immediately begin planning how to make them possible. Marcus looked around the cafe at the assembled beings who represented the pinnacle of galactic power, all of them focused on him with expressions of anticipation. You want humans to teach the galaxy how to think differently. We want you to teach the galaxy how to grow, Princess Vexandra corrected. For the first time in cosmic memory, we have the opportunity to become something new instead of simply perpetuating what has always been. The responsibility is significant, Shadowmere observed, but so is the potential. Marcus felt the weight of that potential settling around him like Shadowmere scales, protective and empowering at the same time. If we do this, it changes everything. The power structures, the political relationships, the way species interact with each other. Yes, the Dragon Lady said again. Are you afraid? Marcus considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, he would have been terrified by the scope of what they were discussing, but his bond with Shadowmere had taught him that fear and excitement often felt remarkably similar. Scared to death, he admitted, but also hopeful. If we can really teach beings to approach problems the way humans do, if we can get different species working together instead of just competing for dominance, the galaxy could become something unprecedented. Queen Lyrelay finished. A truly collaborative civilization instead of a collection of competing empires. And it begins with coffee shops and shared curiosity, Shadowmere added with draconic amusement. How magnificently human. Marcus grinned. When you put it that way, how can we say no? The next few hours were spent in intense planning. The assembled beings, cosmic entities who controlled the fate of trillions, enthusiastically discussed course catalogs, dormitory arrangements, and student exchange programs with the same passion that Marcus's Earth friends had once brought to planning weekend parties. By the time the gathering broke up, they had outlined what would become known as the Collaborative Advancement Initiative, a galaxy-spanning educational experiment designed to foster innovation through interspecies cooperation. The first campus would be established at the Academy, with additional sites planned for every major star system. As the last of the attendees departed through their respective dimensional portals, Marcus found himself alone with Shadowmere and the Dragon Lady in the now-quiet cafe. You realize, the Dragon Lady said, that you've just agreed to reshape galactic civilization. I realize, Marcus replied, though to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how we're going to do it, the same way you've done everything else, she observed, by refusing to accept that it's impossible. She speaks truth, Shadowmere confirmed. Your greatest strength has always been your willingness to attempt the unprecedented. The Dragon Lady rose from her seat, her form beginning to fade as she prepared to return to her own dimensional realm. Marcus Chen of Earth, when I chose to present that ancient egg to the royal heirs, I knew that none of them would be chosen. I was waiting for someone who would approach it without assumptions, without preconceptions about what was supposed to happen. Marcus looked up at her, curious. You knew it would choose me? I knew it would choose someone unexpected, someone who represented possibility rather than certainty. She smiled, and for a moment her ancient features held an expression of genuine warmth. What I did not expect was how magnificently you would exceed even my optimistic projections. She began to fade from the cafe, her voice echoing with the weight of cosmic authority. The future belongs to those brave enough to imagine it differently. I am eager to see what you and your species will teach us about the impossible. When she was gone, Marcus and Shadowmere sat in comfortable silence, looking out at the cosmos through the cafe's transparent walls. Are you ready for this? Shadowmere asked. Marcus thought about the question. 6 months ago, he had been a community college dropout whose biggest concern was passing his basic science requirements. Now he was being asked to help design the educational future of galactic civilization. I'm ready to try, he said finally. And if we fail spectacularly, at least it'll be an interesting failure. With humans, Shadowmere observed with affection, failure is rarely truly final. It is simply another form of data. Marcus grinned. Then let's go collect some data. As they prepared to leave the Probability Cafe, Marcus caught one last glimpse of the cosmos beyond its walls. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were going about their lives, unaware that everything was about to change. The stable, predictable galaxy they had always known was about to encounter humanity's greatest gift to the universe, the absolute conviction that anything was possible if you were stubborn enough to keep trying. The adventure truly begins now, Shadowmere said as they stepped through a portal back to the academy. I know, Marcus replied, and for the first time since this whole impossible journey had begun, he found himself genuinely looking forward to whatever came next. The galaxy, as it turned out, was about to learn what humans meant when they said the sky was the limit, especially when the sky was infinite and the limit was just another word for starting point. Every royal heir failed the final trial, then the dragon lady smirked and chose the school nerd.